So I'm Karen Klassen. I'm from the Manitoba Organic Alliance, and I'll start by saying I'm based in Manitou, Manitoba, which is southern Manitoba, which I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on Treaty 1 territory in the lands, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, and Dakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. So we're going to start the mini conference by launching a new website that MOA, along with MFGA, Manitoba Forage Grassland Association, have been working together on, and it's called the Manitoba Grazing Exchange website. And I'm going to put the link in the chat, not to try and distract you while I'm talking, but so you can follow along, but I'm also going to share my screen as I go along just so you can see what the website's about. So like I said, we work together with Manitoba Forage Grassland Association, who's also generously our gold sponsor for this conference. And I've got Duncan Morrison, who's here. I don't know, Duncan, if you want to wave. And we've been working on this project together. And we have been working, we're thankfully supported by the Manitoba Habitat Heritage Corporation for this project. And we were inspired, one of our board members was inspired about this from looking at the South Dakota Grazing Exchange website. And I will not talk about it because we actually have we have Cindy here who will be talking about this and the actual practical experiences of this. But a few years ago, one of our board members saw this website and thought, that looks really cool. We should try and do this in Manitoba. So we have expanded it to Manitoba, but we also plan on moving it across Canada. You can see when you look at the website, it's actually a Google map. And so you can, even though it's called Manitoba at the moment, you can put a pin on wherever you are. Well, essentially in the world, but in Canada for sure. As I see, we've got lots of people from across Canada here today as well. So this website is a part of a larger project with the Conservation Trust or Manitoba Habitat Heritage Corporation called Improving Soil Stewardship on Manitoba Organic Farms. And the goal of this website is to virtually connect grain farmers with livestock producers. So if someone has land as a grain farmer that either is marginal and they really aren't doing much with it, or they have green manures or cover crops that they would like to have grazed, or just pasture land. Anyone with land that can be grazed can join, and anyone with livestock that wants to find land. I know a lot of people around here have to ship their cattle off quite a distance in order to have their summer grazing pastures. So it's one of the things that we're trying to connect people together who might be a little bit more close and convenient. And just on a personal note, I'm also a farmer. I've got a little bit of organic land and conventional land, and I just happened to mention, I was at a conference on regenerative ag a couple of years ago, mentioned this to my neighbor who has cattle. And he thought that sounded like a fantastic idea to do some grazing on our land. So I've actually been in partnership with my neighbor who's a mile down the road, and he had about 100 in the last 2 years, 100 head of cattle on our land. And he comes every day, moves them. We do rotational grazing. And especially this last year, we had a pretty severe drought, as I'm assuming a lot of you guys did as well. And he did not have to bale feed or feed his cattle here nearly as early as he did on all of his other pasture lands dotted throughout the region. So it was actually quite a good resilient way for both of us to be working as well. So one of the reasons why we wanted to connect this for grain farmers, some of the benefits is that for organic farmers are often doing a green manure every few years, and often are tilling it in July and then either leaving it black or having to plant some sort of cover crop after that. Well, this is a great way to reduce your tillage. Essentially, for me, it's awesome because I don't have to do anything. I mean, I go out there and look at the grass, and it's really just a nice little stroll in the park for me. And then I chat with my neighbor about how it's going and how we should plan moving. But I don't have to get out a big old tractor and disc it in and plant something else in. So it's actually quite labor saving on my perspective. It's also great for weed control. And so it's the cycling of nutrients as well as improving soil health, because you're getting all sorts of other benefits when you introduce livestock onto the land. And like I said, some of the benefits for the livestock producers can be just access to land. And hopefully this will be a way for you to find maybe neighbors you didn't even know had land or were interested in this, a little bit closer to what you're currently doing as well. So I was just going to try and show you what it actually looks like and give you a bit of a walkthrough. So I'm going to share my screen and this is what the website looks like. All right, so you can see it's a Google map. You can move it depending on where you are in the country, move it to wherever you want to go. You create an account just by clicking that bar up there that says create account. For me, I already did that. You can see my little icon right here, FOSPA farm. I've got 160 acres to graze. So I'm going to log in to my account just to show you how easy it is to actually look. And thank goodness I remembered my password. Of course, I'm not logging in. Okay. So we launched this today, so there may be some technical issues. So what I'm going to do instead is just show you some of the different things you can put on here. So when you're logging in, what you would do is then go and create a PIN and find your farm where it is, and you would put in the address of your farm, or obviously a lot of us don't have addresses. If you're on Google Maps as a farm, which mine is, I just typed the farm name in there and that was fine for the address code. Otherwise, you can just put in a street in your town and then just drag it around. Just putting in a little bit of information. Basically, it's whatever you want someone else to know about your farm and what you're offering and what you you're kind of, what your farm's about is what you would be putting in there. So you can just see, obviously it's number of acres, what you have to graze, when you want someone to graze your land, or if for me as a cover crop person, and if you had livestock, it would be what kind of livestock and numbers, whether you have fencing, watering, and then a couple of other questions around that. And you can upload photos, and then when you see someone who might be in your neighborhood who's got a pin on there, you just hit contact owner and it'll send an email, and your phone number will be on there as well. So it'll just send a message and you will take it from there. So that's all we're doing. The website's just to facilitate that sort of meet and greet, just so you can see who's out there, who's interested in this, and hopefully we'll create lots of great connections this way. I'm going to stop sharing there. And like I said, we have people from South Dakota who are going to be talking a little bit about how it's actually worked. They've been running this for a few years. So they can talk a little bit about how it's worked in real practice and give you a bit of information. And then at the end of that, we'll have some questions. And so if you have any questions around that, you can throw them out then. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague at the Manitoba Organic Alliance, Catherine Boschman. She's our program coordinator, and she'll take it from there.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all here today. I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers from South Dakota, from the South Dakota Soil Health Coalition, which is an organization directed by a board of farmers and ranchers who are dedicated to increasing sustainable ag production through diversification and improved soil health. So first up, we have Cindy Zenk. She is their coordinator and helps carry out their mission across the state by providing soil health resources, information, education, research, and mentorship to farmers. So this includes coordinating with partner organizations, planning an annual soil health conference, which just took place earlier this month. I think it was last week, which is great. It's also, her work also involves planning producer consultations, overseeing the distribution of research results about the benefits of soil health management practices to the media, and much, much more. Cindy was first introduced to agriculture and its impacts by her dad, and today she works with her husband to share their values with their children and grandchildren. And before I hand it off to Cindy, I'll also introduce Shawn, he is the Vice Chairman of South Dakota Soil Health Coalition. He and his wife, Christy, and their 2 daughters live on a farm in Caputa. I hope I said that right. Where they run a cow-calf operation, stockers registered Black Angus, beef finishing, and produce irrigated livestock forage. Shawn's farm has been completely no-till since 2016. He uses cover crops, livestock grazing of cover crops, manages intensive grazing practices, and no longer uses any synthetic fertilizer. Shawn's goals for the future of soil health on his operation and throughout South Dakota include regenerating the soil, minimizing erosion, providing nutrient-dense products to consumers, assisting with community education and outreach, holistically managing his operation, and increasing both biodiversity and drought resistance. So I will hand it off to Cindy and Shawn, who are going to tell us more about the South Dakota Grazing Exchange.
Well, thank you, Catherine and Karen. We really appreciate the invitation, and thank you all for joining. Like Catherine had said, I work with the Soil Health Coalition. I have the privilege of working with 9 directors and probably about 650 members throughout South Dakota. We did just have our conference, so they were sending me emails and I wasn't ignoring. I just kept saying, I will get to it when I get done. But our conference was in northern South Dakota in Aberdeen. So we're thankful. I see Amber Kenyon is on. We had Steve Kenyon as one of our speakers at our conference this year. So we were utilizing Canada in several different ways the last couple of weeks. So the Soil Health Coalition has been pretty fortunate with the director and the leadership that we've had. One of the principles, as you all know, is the livestock integration, and that's how the Grazing Exchange had started. It was a brainstorm session, and the director said we need to get more livestock back on the land, just as the land was intended when we first arrived here. So we worked, looked around and tried to find different ways or different sites that were available. And I started researching and trying to find ways that I thought it would work best for producers. I farm with my husband, like Catherine said, on his original farm that his great-grandpa had started. So we are here and trying to keep it here for our grandkids. So we implement the type of practices that we are doing through the coalition as well. The Grazing Exchange started in 2019. We launched ours then. And since then, we have had, just like your organization had reached out, we have had other states in the United States reach out to us as well. So if you do go onto our site or onto Manitoba's, I'm not sure what your URL is, Karen. So if you check out that, if you zoom out, you know, if you can scroll down to South Dakota, and we'll be able to see pins all across the United States. So you can log into ours and the pin would show up on the Canada site too. So no matter what site you go onto and create your account, those pins will show up at both places. So that's the unique, I guess, advantageous way for us to launch this, is trying to get everyone to unify and to see that agriculture doesn't have state boundaries. You know, it goes across those boundaries and we are unified in no matter where we are. On our site, we did create it, try to make it as user-friendly as possible. We did create a how-to video, and I believe Karen also has that on their site. So look at that and watch it. It was very useful when other people were starting to learn about that site, and it just helps you to know how to create your PIN as well as log in. I know Karen had a little trouble trying to log in and show some different things, but it is a very useful, user-friendly, create your account, put your PIN on there, and then the connections are made. If you look at our state one, people say, well, you don't have very many pins. And actually, it's designed to have pins come up and come down. So once you make that connection, it does go down. You know, people are supposed to take it down after, you know, so you don't have it continuously there available when you've already made those connections. So Shawn Freeland is, like Catherine said, our vice chairman. And he has utilized the Grazing Exchange, so he has some personal experience sharing how he has made those connections with his operation.
Yep, that's very good, Cindy. Yeah, so I'm Shawn Freeland. I ranch with my family just east of Rapid City, which is on the western side of South Dakota, right up against the Black Hills. You can see Mount Rushmore from my house at night when they light it up. So yeah, basically a cow-calf producer. We do raise grass finished beef, and with that is I found is genetics. So we tried really hard to get the right genetics so that we get beef that'll marble well and grow fast on grass. And with that, when we get a severe drought like we've had and you guys have had, you hate to just take those cows and dump them. So we've used the Grazing Exchange to try to hold on to those genetics and just kind of stick a pin out there and see what happens. And fortunately it's worked for us. If it's not raining here, it seems to be raining somewhere else in South Dakota or nearby. And we've used it about 3 times now and made connections and moved cows around and set up leases for guys and shares on some. And so it's been a pretty fascinating tool. It's great to see it spreading across, the United States and Canada. So it's kind of my, if you guys have questions for me, I would be happy to answer them. More about my operation, I guess. We run, like I said, cow-calf operation, and then we have some irrigated ground. So we like to use that irrigation to grow cover crops and stockpile that. So we'll graze. We don't have any hay and equipment anymore, so we graze all of our crops. So we'll graze a cool season cover crop normally, and then we'll plant a full season mix, and we use that for stockpile for our winter feed. And then we also stockpile grass if we can. This year we didn't grow much grass, so we're going to be doing some bale grazing to kind of get through what we have here for critters. We have some just kind of started the last couple of years of pasture pork enterprise, so we're running those pigs around. It's kind of funny when he said what tools, what's your favorite tool? I'd have to say mine's the pig, spots that you need to disturb, and it's been they've been pretty successful at doing that. So we also have a tiny flock of sheep. We have 2, and so hopefully by spring we have 6, but we'll see. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and our operation. And I don't know, Cindy, it's been a really useful tool.
Yeah, it has been. And I'm not sure how long Catherine wanted us to speak. She said just kind of a short presentation, and we'll kind of highlight some of the things about the Grazing Exchange, and we're happy to answer any questions, or I can go more in depth into the exchange as well. It's when we first did it, someone said I'm kind of a matchmaker, and that's exactly what we are, is we're trying to create perfect matches for everyone. And hopefully, we have the tools on there that, there are resources right on the exchange built in to provide you some information as well. And I know Karen also has done that as well on your site. So.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing, both Cindy and Shawn. That's awesome. We'll move on to questions in a few minutes, but before we do that, we wanted to highlight some other experimentations and innovations in feeding. And so we're going to hear from Beach and Donna Bryck-Beach, who have been experimenting with a fodder system. So I'll introduce them, and then we'll hear from them next. So Kevin and Donna have a mixed farm, which includes cereals, pulses, oilseeds, and beef, and it's located near Ernfold, Saskatchewan, and they became certified organic in 1989. So over the years, they have marketed their products through regular channels, but they've also established a local market for their beef, which they find very rewarding. Off-farm, they have volunteered their times with various organic groups, including the Advisory Committee to Organic Research, OCIA, DOC CERT, and Organic Connections. One of their main goals is to grow nutritious food while maintaining healthy soils. So I'm going to hand it off to them, and I'm going to quickly throw up their slideshow. There we go.
Hi, everyone. This afternoon, we're going to tell you about our fodder system that was started in the winter 2022. And hopefully after our presentation, we've given you some fodder for thought. Next slide, please. Why did we decide to invest in a fodder system? Well, the picture is worth 1,000 words, but basically the landscape was covered with cracks, gopher holes, and dry vegetation. This was year 4 of 4 years of things getting progressively drier. Grazing was limited. Hay crop was limited as well. Cover crops that we grazed, everything was just sort of limited, and the cash crops as well. Some were baled. We combined very little, and the cows grazed some of it as well. So in summary, there was a shortage of feed for sure. So we had an acquaintance, friend of ours, who started a fodder system 2 years ago and was raving to us about the success of this fodder system, and invited us down, take a tour of it, and we, given the conditions we were facing, we thought, well, let's give it a shot. So next slide.
Okay, so we just want to walk you through, I guess, the hardware that's involved in this system and also some of the tasks that are necessary to produce fodder. So it started, we needed a facility to house this system. So we purchased a garage package, basically. With COVID and all the restrictions, it was really hard to get anybody or get any materials, or I guess we all know the drill that we have all been through. So we ended up finding this building. So you could move on to the next slide. That building needed, we used spray foam insulation, then it was wired and plumbed for water, and a drain system installed in it. So on the left hand side, these are the trays that sit in the building, and you can just see the water system. There's a black hose and then little clear plastic tubes that extend off of that hose, the supply hose, down into the back of the trough. The middle, the next slide is just a picture of the racking system, and it's simply a great big aluminum shelving unit. There's 56 trays on it, 8 per row horizontally and 7 high. And it is sloped gradually from the back to the front, so the water trickles in the back and then percolates down through the grain, and any excess water that isn't soaked up runs down. There's clear plastic plexiglass doors on the front of it, so the water just runs down into the white buckets at the bottom, and then it goes out to drain. So the next picture is just a picture of one of the trays. They're just about 8 feet long and approximately 7 inches wide. And then the one on the far right picture, that's just our watering system. It's just simply a dual zone garden sprinkler type timer, which you can set to run at any time of day, and you can set the duration of the run. So we have it's split on our rack. So the first 4 rows are on zone 1, and then the 3 remaining rows are on zone 2. We're relying on our well pump to supply pressure to that, so we didn't want to overtax it. We wanted to have enough pressure to get enough water on. What was I going to say? So we installed a pressure tank in this building too, with a check valve. So the well pump pressures it up, and we have our reservoir in the building. So if cattle are drinking or anything, we don't lose our volume as it flows. When it kicks on to water, it waters every 6 hours for approximately 5 minutes. And we play around with that a bit, the duration of water. We want to get about 40 ounces per water per tray every 6 hours. That's kind of, when we first start out, the grain is is still pretty, it isn't sprouted yet, so you don't want to have too heavy a flow on it or it'll start to erode the seed. But, next slide, please. So in preparation to lay the grain on the troughs, the grain needs to be soaked. So we just simply used a wheelbarrow. We soak the water, we soak it in the water for approximately a minimum of 4 hours, and lots of flexibility with that. We've done 4 hours right up to 12 hours. And the longer you soak, it will germinate a little quicker on the trays. We have a fish aerator stone underneath that just to percolate air up through the seed. When I put the water in the wheelbarrow, I put in approximately an ounce of hydrogen peroxide. That's just to disinfect and kill any pathogens or fungus, you know, that might be potentially there to grow on the seed. Very important in hydroponics.
Barley seed.
And here we're using barley seed. Barley is the recommended grain of choice. You can use any seed, but the barley typically has a little higher protein value in it. So
And 7 gallons of grain.
yes, and per 8 trays that we put, we're putting about approximately 6 pounds of grain per tray. And the picture on the right just shows the grain soaking. Looks like there's cellophane over that, but it's just the water reflection. So next slide, please. So once you've soaked it for that magic 4 to 12 hours, you drain it. We have a drain cut into the bottom of the wheelbarrow, and then you let it drain for another 6 hours or more, just so that you don't want the seed too mushy or it doesn't spread properly. And then the next picture is just filling a scoop. You fill the scoop up and you just dump it into the tray. Next, please. And here is a picture of the trowel that we use. They call it a seeder. Once you've dumped the grain onto the tray, this trowel spreads the grain evenly throughout the length of the tray. That's fairly important, you know, so you get consistent germination. And yeah, so that's basically as simple as that is. It's just a matter of spreading it out. Next one, please. And here's the stages of growth. So the one on the left that's 4 days after it was laid in on the tray. So you can see it started to germinate quite well. Once you see the little green shoots, it grows quite rapidly. And then the middle one is day 8. So that gives you an idea of the growth you can get from it. And then the one on the right is just the various stages. So basically we see you start the bottom tray. There's 7 trays, so it kind of, you're trying to get 8 trays per day, you know, so you seed one day and the next day on through the 7 days. And then once you get it growing, you just keep rotating that. As you pull it out, you reseed it, and it's just a revolving door at that point. Very important with the growing, we keep the building at approximately 15 degrees Celsius, so around 60 Fahrenheit. You can vary that a little bit, but not too much. Humidity, you want to hold it around 60%. When you do get that growth going and it does water, the humidity will spike up to 80% real quick. But we have a fan. Air circulation is very important, just to keep the air moving so you don't get stagnant air. Mold is probably the biggest enemy in a system like this, so you want to keep air moving. And we do have a couple little dehumidifiers as well to bring the humidity down to try to control that. So that's something. Everything basically is automatic. It's not like we have to babysit it. There's the chores of soaking the grain, draining the seed, and then seeding it, and everything else kind of just is working on its own. So it's a chore. It's not a heavy chore. It's not like having a dairy. So, but anyway, next.
And leaf blower too.
Oh yeah, and if the air gets stagnant, we'll open the doors and just use a battery-powered leaf blower just to blast air around in there. And that works well too. Next, please. And this is the harvest. So that's what they look like as they're heading out to the cattle. So you can just simply grab on and pull it out, and it comes out like a chunk of carpet or sod, basically. So it's nice and thick and green, nice mat of white roots at the bottom. So we just pull that out and throw it into a bucket of a tractor or the back of a truck, and you're good to go out to the cows. So we can go on to the next one. Yeah, that's just another picture, kind of the same. I'm playing around with it, pretending to have a necklace on, I guess. Yeah, thrown into the bucket of the tractor, and it's going to be headed to the cattle. And now you can feed the whole strip, the whole 8-foot strip, or if you have a knife, you can cut it up into pieces if you like. It really actually binds together quite tightly. Like you can't just tear it, you need to cut it. And I guess we can go to the next slide. Yeah, that's just a picture of our cows, mostly predominantly Angus. We use Angus herd sires. That's just a picture of them eating. At first, it was really kind of entertaining. So you'd throw a strip out and they'd come and sniff it, and then they'd take a bite, and the whole 8 feet would move. And it would scare them, and they'd run away and look at it, and then come back. And
because they put it in their mouth and they pull it up, yeah, they're not used to the piece of grass coming up. So yeah, it took a while. Some of them, most of them are, just come directly to it and start munching down. There's a few of them that just have no interest in it whatsoever. They just stand around. But in general, the cattle, for the most part, come running to the tractor or the back of the truck to chow down on it.
Yeah, and each, I don't know if I mentioned, each strip weighs on average 30 pounds. So we're putting a maximum of 6 pounds of grain on the tray, and we're getting 30 pounds back. So we're, for 1 pound of grain, we're gaining, it's multiplied 5 times. So,
Feed.
yeah, we haven't gone far enough to do any actual nutrient testing, but the fellow that we purchased this system from, he did send a sample in, and his barley fodder was 17.5% protein. And he'd sent some other fodder away, but it went to BC right when the flood happened. So that, I think, spoiled it, got lost in transit. So that's about all I can tell you about the nutritional value of it. It's very highly digestible. We've been told it's up to 90% digestible. So our system is small for the herd we have, but we wanted to start into it small to see how it did work. We view it just as a supplement. We're trying to save some hay. The animals still need hay. They can't live on this. They need roughage, but they don't need super good quality roughage if they're getting 3 or 4 or 5 pounds of this a day as well. So next slide. And I get that's about it for our presentation. So we'll look forward to any questions if anybody has interest. That's our contact information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin and Donna. And thanks to all of our speakers, to Karen, Shawn, and Cindy as well. We're going to open things up for questions. So if you have questions for anybody, you can raise your hand using the reactions button, or you can, flag us down some other way, unmute yourself and give us a shout. Oh, we've got one question in the chat as well. Also, I'll just mention before we get into questions, if you're a livestock farmer and you're experimenting with something new or innovative in feeding, feel free to share that as well. Even if it didn't work, I mean, that's all good information. And I think, sharing that kind of stuff is really, really helpful in what these conferences should all be about. So we got a bunch of questions coming in already. So how many cows does an 8-foot strip feed? So I'm guessing that is for Kevin and Donna.
That's a really good question. The way we're running our cows right now, they're just out, they're actually still grazing a flax crop that we would have otherwise combined. So when you feed them, you have the whole herd mulling around there, and they eat up 8 strips fairly fast. I would guess they're getting, some of them don't get any because some are indifferent, but most of them do. Probably 2 pounds on average per cow, maybe 3. You know, some are more aggressive than others. So
Great, thank you.
I think that,
Next, we have a question from Jeanette, who wants to know what's the name of the company that you bought the fodder system from?
the fellow lives at Gladmar. The name of the company, it's a Fodder Tech system. Now it's out of the, do you know where it was from?
No.
It's from down in the States, Utah. Sandy, Utah is where the system is made. We can post the name of the fellow we purchased it from in Saskatchewan. He's actually a sales rep for them. And like I say, they have 2 years experience and they have a far larger system than we have. So he has lots of good advice of what you do and what you shouldn't do. So we'll post his name if anybody's interested. So can we just put that on the chat?
Yeah, just make sure it's set to everyone and then post it in the chat, and then whoever's interested can access that.
Okay, we'll put it up there.
Justin asks, how many pounds of fodder do you feed per day per cow?
They pretty much answered.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool.
We're putting
Thanks,
out
Justin.
like, yeah, generally we put out eight of those trays per day. So that's about 240 pounds of feed. So that gives you an idea. If we had a better control with some animals actually in a pen, you know, we could better assess that. But right now we're new into this and our livestock are still wandering around. So it's kind of hard for us to have a handle on the actual consumption.
So the one thing that we noticed, we do have 2 bulls in a pen, and Kevin made the comment a couple of times last week that, well, they should have been through that bale before. You know, usually they've gone through that bale. They would need a bale sooner than they have, and we were just giving them about a half a strip.
Yeah.
So yeah, they seem to be doing quite okay and not you know, wanting to eat into that bale as much because they were getting the fodder.
Great. Lauren has asked, what kind of fertilizer do you use?
We're not using any. We're just using that all comes from our water. The Fodder Tech in the book, they do have a liquid additive for nutrients. We don't use that. So I guess I should have mentioned also, you know, very important, like the hydrogen peroxide to disinfect. So it speeds germination. When we do empty the trays with the fodder, I spray a cleaning vinegar, like an Allen's cleaning vinegar, 10% acetic acid, just to kind of sanitize the trays too. But other than that, we use nothing, just our well water.
Great.
I should also mention, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. We're certified organic, so you know we have an approval from our certifier to use the vinegar and the hydrogen peroxide. Also in the standards, the organic standards, that hydroponics, they have a limitation of you can grow hydroponics for up to 30 days. That's what they allow. So we're well within that because we're growing only 7 days, you know, duration. So, but just if anybody's thinking about it, make sure you know the organic regulations surrounding what you're going to do.
Great. Yeah, no, that's really helpful to mention as well. Amber has asked, I may have missed it, but have you worked out if you're saving money when you include your labor versus what the cows are eating?
Again, we're just a little too early in that at this point. So probably at this point we aren't. You know, the building we have will accommodate just about double the system we have, and I think, you know, if we ever went to that scale, then the economics are more, probably look a little better. We put an electric meter on our building, so, you know, we can monitor how much electricity we're using, but we're just not at that point of doing that yet. We wanted to get comfortable growing and feeding, you know, before we really look at that economic side. Typical farmer, I guess, look at the economics last.
The other thing I'm interested in just seeing how the cows will do. We're planning, like we do have yearlings, long yearlings, and our weanling calves. We keep about half of our herd, but I think we're going to focus on it going the fodder going primarily to the cows. And in their, we start calving mid-April and into May. So seeing just what the calves will be like and what the cows condition they'll be like, because it has been, the drought has, you know, taken its toll kind of on animals and the feed. So and our neighbor friend of ours was talking about just the fact that more cows were eating the dry cash crops and weren't getting the vitamins in that they should. And we're wanting to get a test done on the fodder to see what the vitamin content is in it as well. We do give them minerals and vitamins, but we're hoping that the fodder will, you know, be a really good supplement for them and show some results that way too.
Great. Will has asked, did you choose foam insulation for reasons of the high humidity?
Yes.
Yes, that was, yeah, the main reason. And just to give a really good seal. So there's no air, any air coming in, that's where you're going to see your mold, because you right away you get condensation. So that's the reason we used it. Yes.
Great. Great. And then Joe asked, what is the dry matter yield per tray?
Yeah, I don't know if, I'm just looking here on an analysis. I don't know if it says it here.
Just while you look at that, I'll note Kevin
Yes.
did post the name and number for the contact for the fodder system in the chat, so you can check that out there.
Uh, 20% is the dry matter yield, I think. This is a little fuzzy. This is from Scott's
Here.
analysis. Dry matter, yeah. Moisture is 80, dry matter is 20.
19. Yeah.
Yeah, 19.6. Yeah.
Great, thank you. All right, are there any other questions? Maybe any other questions for Kevin and Donna, or for Shawn and Cindy, or Karen about the Grazing Exchange platform?
I actually have a question for Shawn, if you wouldn't mind just sharing his experience on the partnerships he's actually made so far with through the website, and what was it like? What worked out? How did you organize it?
Yeah, so those are, it was pretty easy. I just got a text one day and said, "Do you still have cattle available?" I said, "I do." Everybody's a little bit different and you know what they can kind of how they run their operation, and we're pretty particular how we travel across and visit with them and look over their place and make sure it was going to be a good fit for us. And then it kind of depends. So we have one We had one guy who's an older gentleman, and he just did a straight lease on our cows and gave us so much per head. And then there was a younger guy that was wanting to get started, and I'm all about trying to help the youth. So we did those on shares with that kid, and then we're buying back the cows from him if he can't afford to keep them all there. So everybody's a little bit different. But one of the things I would stress is making sure that you kind of look over what they have and how they run their operation, and you know what their fence and water looks like. And we didn't want to have our cows just dry lotted. We wanted to make sure they were going to be out on grass or some sort of crop aftermath or something, or both, but we definitely didn't want them dry lotted. So yeah, it's important to go kind of visit with them, but we just kind of work through it. There is some different calculators online to help you work through that. There's also some different sources for contracts and that sort of thing. So the Grazing Exchange has just been a good tool to connect, and then we just kind of take it from there.
Great, and I think that sort of works a bit to answer Will's question in the chat about how you determine grazing feeds where you're feeding on other people's land. Is, I guess, sort of you just have a conversation and hash that out.
Yeah, you want to make sure that it's going to work for you first. You know, if it's more profitable to have them run your cows rather than selling them, but it's also important to make sure that it doesn't stretch them. So if you find out or kind of look at their place and see how they run, if it looks like it's going to stretch them, then it ends up, that's not a good idea, because in a year or two, then pretty soon they're stressed and the relationship kind of disintegrates. So you want to be real careful with that. But for the most part, from my experience, we've only done it for about 3 years now, but we've had pretty good luck. So it's been good for us. We've been able to keep the cows, and you know, I'm excited about helping the younger generation kind of get going. So I think it's a win-win.
Great. Before I get to the next questions in the chat, I saw Kevin and Donna, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thanks. I just put it into the chat too. I was just wondering, Shawn, what you mentioned genetics earlier. What type of genetics have you found thrive well on the grass mixture diet?
To get the marbling.
So we're just sticking with Angus cattle for the most part, but we're trying to source, you know, those smaller, moderate, easier flesh and type females. You know, don't look at the end product. That's my biggest cost, is feeding the cow. So anything that she produces is a byproduct for me. So we try to use the cow to change our landscape. We try to use her to, you know, move her here or there to try to promote grass or get rid of weeds or whatever. And then that grass finished beef is kind of I just felt like we transitioned to grass finish about I think probably 2016 is kind of when we started that thing for my family and for our ranch and for our community. So yeah, it's not we don't look at it as our main profit center. We look at the cow as a tool, and then the beef we get off it is a kind of a byproduct.
Great, thanks,
I
Shawn.
don't know if that
Oh, go ahead.
answered your genetics. They were Angus. I wouldn't say there's a certain seed stock producer that has produced better genetics for us, but I like them thick and deep, and those are the cows that I like that work best for me, that take the least amount of feed, and we can get by on stockpiled grass through the winter.
Awesome. I just got a note here, Shawn, that your video or your audio is a little patchy. So maybe if you are able to turn off your video, that might improve the audio. Thanks. I think we have another question for you here from Jeanette. What are some of the prices you've paid just as a baseline? Like where do you start?
What are some of the prices we paid on the grazing exchange?
Yeah,
So that I think that's going to be different with everybody, because you need to know your numbers. You need to know where your break even is on your own herd. And so if you know, let's say that you figure you make $300 a head. Why, if you want to lease those cows to somebody else, you know, you want to get at least that $300 a head. Otherwise you're losing a little bit of money. If you can get more, great. But it's, I guess that's the way we did it. We just looked at our bottom line and we knew exactly how much we were making from each cow. And so we tried to find somebody that would lease them for that amount, and we did. And so that's kind of where we're at. But it's, yeah, it's important to know your numbers.
awesome. Thank you, Shawn. I have another question from Joe for, I believe, Kevin and Donna. He's asking, why not feed the barley instead of the fodder? The dry matter is virtually the same from the barley and the fodder.
I think there's a bit of synergy going on with the sprouts, that you're gaining more by feeding that fodder. You're releasing quite a few enzymes and you know, in that barley once it's sprouted. The nutrients, some old statistics. Now this goes back to 1989 regarding sprouted barley. The vitamin E in barley grain was 7.4 milligrams per kilogram dry matter. In the barley sprouts, it was 62.4. So quite a spike there. The beta carotene was 4.1 in the barley grain, 42.7 in the sprouts. Biotin was 0.16 in the grain and 1.15 in the sprouts. Free folic acid was 0.12 in the grain and 1.05 in the sprouts. So I think you're gaining more than, I look at it not so much just on the dry matter basis. I think it's what else you're gaining. You know, they are eating a fair amount of moisture in that as well. I think that also stimulates the rumen too. So that's kind of, and we're new, you know, we're fairly young into this too. We may determine a different answer for that question a year from now. But I think right at this point, you do get that multiplier effect of nutrients in a sprout. Great.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there any other questions for any of our speakers? Or does anybody have their own feeding experiment that they want to share? And if you want to do that, you feel free to unmute yourself and share it, because we'd love to hear that.
I was just wondering, does the Grazing Exchange have different labels for organic or different types of land certifications?
Yeah, and one of the drop-down things that you check off when you're signing up or for putting your PIN on is whether you're organic or not. So you can tell both on the grain or livestock side where what the land is.
Awesome. Any other questions or anything to share? Oh, here we go. Joe has asked, what is the best grass maturity for finishing beef? I'm not quite sure who this question is for. That might be for Shawn.
Yeah, so I'll shoot on that. Like I said, we like to try to use our cows as a tool. So we're constantly trying to keep them moving and just clipping that grass. But, you know, fall, September, October for us is when we're really putting pounds on. So I wouldn't say, I would imagine it would, you know, depend on where you're at and whether you have a cool seasons and warm season grasses. But taking that bite when the grass is, you know, at the right stage is important, and not taking too much so it can grow back quickly. I would say it's going to depend on where you're at, I think, for the, you know, for that question. But
Great. Thank you, Shawn.
yeah.
I'll just give a minute just in case anybody else has a question they want to pop into the chat or unmute themselves and share an experiment or an experiment gone wrong. Okay. Okay. Yeah, if there are no other questions, I think we can wrap up this session. Thank you again to all of our speakers. It's really great to hear about your experiences and your insight. Hold on. Oh, Cindy has just thrown something into the chat. Producers looking for examples on contracting when utilizing the Grazing Exchange are in the resources tab at the bottom. So take a note of that. If you are planning on using the Grazing Exchange, you can check that out as well. Thank you, Cindy. So before we take a break, I just want to put in a quick plug for all the Manitoba farmers who are with us here today. So Manitoba Organic Alliance, we're piloting a cost share and agronomy program this summer. So we can help cover some of the costs for things like cover crops or setting up rotational grazing. So if you're an organic farmer in Manitoba, check out our website, or you can send me a message in the chat and I can tell you more about it and give you more information. So I just wanted to put a plug in there, especially if you're interested in getting set up and using the Grazing Exchange website.